This is TWiT.
Time to talk to our car guy. He's principal researcher at Guidehouse Insights. He is the host of the Wheel Bearings podcast at wheelbearings.media. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Sam Abuelsamid. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year.
Did you go to CES?
Oh, man, did I go to CES. I got back Friday night. I flew out there on last Saturday, and got back on Friday night. In the course of 4.5 days, I did over 40 meetings, briefings, a few press conferences, and walked about 32 miles.
Wow. One night at Vegas is like a year in any other place, as Murray
Pretty much,
used to say. Yeah.
You did CES.
I did. And I can also heartily recommend the Zoom H1N. I have one. I've been using them for years. And the H1N is the newer one. It's a big improvement over the original H1, which I had. The main difference, the main improvement compared to the H1, they made some changes in the interface, the buttons, layout, and everything, so it's a little easier to use. But also, they went from a single AA battery to 2 AAA batteries. The original H1 would chew through those AA's like you wouldn't believe. So the H1N does a lot better.
Good. Yeah, I forgot to mention you have to buy batteries for that. Phone might be a better choice.
Batteries not included.
Phone gets better and better, and you don't need an external microphone for your smartphone. So, Sam, was there a lot of car action at CES this year?
There was a lot of automotive-related action at CES. So let's start with Honda. The car, if you're watching the video stream right now, the car that's behind me here is the Honda Series Zero Saloon. Honda actually showed off two Series Zero concepts. The other is the Space Hub, which is a sort of van-like vehicle. And the design language that you see here is apparently the direction they're going for their new EVs that they're launching starting in 2026 on their own dedicated EV platform.
So we should mention a concept car. It means they're not going to make this car, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, in most cases, they don't make that exact car. But what you see here with this car, it's a very sleek, swoopy,
it's super cool looking.
One box. Some
very
people describe it almost as Lamborghini-like.
Yeah,
it's very aerodynamic. And talking to the people at Honda, this is very much the design direction that they're going for the first Series Zero car in 2026.
Wow. This looks like the Jetsons would be driving this.
It does kind of look like that.
It's really goofy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You think it's goofy?
I think it's goofy.
Is it safe, Sam? I mean, it doesn't look like they have much crumple zone in the front.
Well, actually, they do, because the passenger compartment is actually set surprisingly far back when you look at it in profile. Oh, okay. You'll see it's actually it's actually quite a large car. This is a big sedan.
EVs tend to be, because the batteries are big and heavy, right?
Well, they don't necessarily have to be.
No, my wife has a Mini Cooper, but it's only got 90-mile range.
Right.
I've got 90-mile range.
Even for what they're doing here, this is the production version is probably this is larger than a Honda Accord.
Wow.
And
more
so
expensive?
I think we have no idea at this point. It's still 2 years away.
Right.
But the production version will probably be somewhat smaller, but we'll have these kinds of design themes. This very sleek design. So we'll wait and see.
Is there a practical reason for that kind of design? Is there more to it than just we want to make it look like it's from the future? Why do this kind of huge windshield? Because we see that, I feel like I've seen that a lot with electrical vehicles in particular, the huge windshield and the sort of bubble front that looks very sleek. Does that help with getting better range?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you want with an EV is you want really low aerodynamic drag, because a big part of operating an EV is getting the regenerative braking. So what you want to do is you want to be able to recapture as much kinetic energy through regenerative braking as you possibly can. So if you have a lot of aerodynamic drag, the air is going to be slowing the car down. And you're not going to have as much of your kinetic. So the kinetic energy is going to be going into overcoming the aerodynamic drag. Oh. What you want is as little friction from the air, from the road, from the rolling resistance, as little friction anywhere else as possible, so that all of that energy can go back into the battery, and that will help your range. In the case of this here, this is a particularly extreme example of that. But in general, you want better aero for EVs. And this is, like I said, this is kind of the overall direction they're going, but it's not exactly what it's going to look like. So we'll know more probably later next year or sometime in early 2026 what the production model is going to look like.
Did Honda talk about the solid state battery that they're considering? Is it?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's no technical details about this car, and frankly, I would not expect to see solid state batteries in any significant volume in production vehicles until towards the end of the decade.
Isn't that going to be the big kind of shift in EVs? Is newer battery tech?
Newer battery tech, but it may or may not be solid state.
Might be these lithium metal anode batteries they're talking about now.
Well, I mean that is one form of solid state. Well, actually, it doesn't. Lithium metal, most of the solid state batteries are, lithium metal anode.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't necessarily have to be solid state. Solid state is referring to the electrolyte material.
Right.
So current batteries use either a liquid or polymer gel electrolyte. And solid state batteries go to literally a solid material. So the whole thing, once the cell is formed, is one solid chunk of various materials.
Some of the things people want with their EVs is faster charging time. Right now, you're spending at least half an hour at a charging station to even get to 80% charge, and then of course longer battery life. Although so far the battery life on current EVs seems the lifetime seems pretty good.
Battery durability is not an issue.
Yeah.
And I think we probably need to be putting less emphasis on really fast charging because, that's not great for the batteries. And it also requires a lot of power to charge a battery quickly.
Oh, interesting.
I think what we need to focus more on, we need to have fast charging available in lots of places, for when people are taking longer trips. But what we really need to put more emphasis on is having AC charging, slower charging available in more areas so that people that don't have access to dedicated off-street parking, those that live in apartments or even live in cities where they may have to park curbside, have access to curbside charging because that is way more cost effective. There was a study that was actually just published by the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute where they did some cost analysis of the total cost of ownership of owning a gasoline vehicle versus an EV with AC charging and DC fast charging. And if you're using DC fast charging all the time, essentially you're not going to be saving any money on operating costs. It's going to cost you almost as much, and your payback time to recover the cost premium for an EV over a gas vehicle is, depending on the type of vehicle and the size of the battery, could be as much as 20 years.
Wow.
So we need to stop putting so much emphasis on having a gasoline fueling style experience for most people. That should be the exception rather than the rule for owning an EV.
So what? Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack.
AC charging everywhere.
Didn't mean to sidetrack you. What else did you see at CES?
Oh.
I know Honda's working on some other battery technologies, so I thought I'd ask. What else have you seen? Yeah.
So large language models, generative AI.
AI, of course,
it's coming whether we like it or not.
Volkswagen said they're gonna put an AI in there.
I had a demo in a Volkswagen ID7.
Yeah.
Volkswagen uses their voice recognition system that they use in their cars right now. It's from a company called Sargent, which used to be part of Nuance. Back in 2020 or 21, Nuance spun off their automotive division as a new company called Sargent. And they've been supplying most of the voice recognition systems for cars for the last 20 odd years. And so what they've done in the in the latest batch of Volkswagens for the European market, at least, is they have integrated a connection to ChatGPT. And what they're using it for, they've got a couple of different applications, but the main thing that it's being used for, if you've used voice recognition in your car, you have no doubt experienced the problem of trying to remember the right vocabulary that your voice rec system can actually understand the commands and process them. And so what they're doing is, if you happen to use the right commands, it will just get processed directly in the vehicle. If what you ask for cannot be understood by the voice recognition system, then it passes it over to ChatGPT, which reformats that, or translates that into commands that the voice recognition system can recognize. So one example that they gave me in the demo, and I've got a YouTube video I recorded that I'll put in the in the Discord.
Oh, good.
But an example they gave was, we were sitting in the car and she said, "Find me Italian restaurants nearby." And so it pulled up a list of nearby Italian restaurants from the point of interest database in the navigation system. Then she said, I'm in the mood for some pasta. And so that command got sent to ChatGPT, translated into "find me some Italian restaurants nearby." And then it came back, it sent that back to the car, searched the point of interest database, and came up with the exact same list of Italian restaurants.
So that's the thing, is that instead of saying "find me Italian restaurant," you could say "I'm in the mood for pasta," and that's the feature.
They're trying to make it a more natural language conversation. Yeah. Okay. And this is what Volkswagen's doing.
Yeah.
Others, maybe doing slightly different things. You can also ask it, to provide some entertainment for you. And, an example they gave was, "tell me a story about dinosaurs."
No, I don't want that.
In that case,
no.
It'll just make something up.
Yes. No.
So it's
a gimmick.
It's still very early days. Well, I think the translation to provide more natural language capability to the voice recognition system is actually very useful. The storytelling stuff is kind of gimmicky, but that improving the natural language processing is definitely a very valuable thing, because that is absolutely something that frustrates people.
Yeah, less cognitive load when you're driving, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
If I have to think, okay, what is the exact way I need to talk to this thing to get what I want? Where instead, whatever actually flies in my head, oh boy, I'm running low on battery and I'm also hungry. And then it realizes, oh, it should look for a place to charge that's near a restaurant, and can sort of do that, as opposed to having to say, "Please direct me to," that actually makes sense.
Yeah, to be able to just say something, however you want to say it, and have it reformat that into something that the voice rec system can deal with, I think is actually very useful. And VW, they're launching that system in Europe in the second quarter of this year, and they're still considering whether to launch it in North America. And one of the reasons why it's more limited that way is because they don't want to run into the problem of hallucinations, and they don't want it providing information that may be not useful or controversial. So they actually explicitly have a lot of guardrails and filters built into it. So for a lot of questions, it will just say, "I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you right now." Like general information questions, it'll just say, "I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you." But for the natural language processing, I think it is actually very useful. And Mercedes-Benz also showed their concept CLA that they showed in Munich at the IAA show back last September, and gave more detail on that. And one of the things, they have a large language model in there, and the production version of that car is coming next year as the next generation CLA. They developed that large language model with NVIDIA, and that whole car is powered by NVIDIA Orin processors. And then BMW was also demonstrating some stuff that they're doing with Amazon with large language models. So I think we're definitely going to see use of LLMs in cars in the next several years, and that voice processing is going to be the big thing.
So fascinating to think of my car having the same GPUs in it as the
it's amazing,
PC that I've built myself. That's really cool.
Yeah.
and different.
Yeah, well, and it's not entirely the same GPU.
Right.
They're using some of the same GPU cores, but they're also integrating, the SoCs that they're building, the systems on a chip that they're building for automotive, also integrate a lot of other, especially a lot of neural processing cores. And actually, Leo, going back to the conversation you were having with Paul and Richard on Windows Weekly earlier this week, they were talking about NPUs, neural processing units. And the key thing that I think they missed on that with these so-called neural processing units, GPUs can do a lot of these AI calculations, but they're essentially doing it through brute force. They are not optimized for this. They
Richard was saying, it is basically an NPU is a GPU, but that's not the case,
it's not.
Really.
It's actually quite different.
Yeah.
A GPU is really has become more of a general purpose processor than just a graphics processor. But because it's so highly parallelized, it can do a decent job of running these AI workloads, but it's not actually. It's very power inefficient to do it that way. And so these NPUs are actually very specifically designed. They're specifically designed to do matrix math operations. So multiplying, dividing, adding matrices, because that's what you need to do for all this AI processing is a lot of matrix math. So they're very highly optimized for that. And that's what we're starting to see in cars now. So we're seeing chips like those from companies like Ambarella, from the NVIDIA chips have some of these NPU cores in there, but Qualcomm is also doing them. Others like Recogni are also doing this, because they're much more power efficient at doing those same workloads than a pure GPU. And that's especially important, going back to what we were talking about earlier with aerodynamics. What you want is efficiency across the board with an EV, so you can get the maximum amount of range from the least amount of battery. Some of these GPU-based processors are consuming hundreds of watts to do their job, and that's not great in an EV.
Right.
You need to reduce that down to the tens of watts, and that's what these NPUs are help to do.
Yeah, Apple's been building NPUs into its hardware since the iPhone came out in, I think, 2017, 2015, and of course all of their new M1, M2, and M3 processors have neural processors, but PCs haven't, and now Intel and others are starting to do that. Qualcomm says by middle of this year they'll have a Qualcomm ARM processor that will have an NPU built in for Windows users. That's what we were talking about on Windows Weekly. What else?
And they already have that for cars too.
Yeah, because cars need AI for self-driving and other things, right? It's not just for the driver. What else? Yeah. Who had the best booth? What car man had the best booth at CES? Well, Lexus has had a good one for years.
There were a limited number of actual automakers at CES this year. There's a lot of suppliers.
Huh.
It's the number of automakers that participate directly in CES has been declining for a number of years. So there was Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes-Benz, Honda. The Honda booth was very dark, as you can see from that photo. It was very dark. Not great lighting there. Probably the Mercedes booth was probably the most interesting of the automaker booths. Kia also had a nice stand. They actually had two. They had a booth inside the West Hall and then another one out in the Central Plaza, right. With their smart home stuff. So they had a couple of EVs that were connected to things in the home. So that was kind of interesting. I generally don't pay a lot of attention to the booths themselves, but more the technology that they're showing. One actually really cool thing that I saw, is a company called Eaton that's been around for a long time. They make they're an automotive supplier, but they're also involved in a lot of other sectors as well. They have what is essentially a tiny EV charging system. And what it is, if you looked at the circuit breaker panel in your home, those little breaker boxes that are in there, if you get an overload on one of your circuits, the trips the breaker, and you got to go flip the switch back. Well, they have a charging system that is essentially a dual slot breaker form factor. So it can go right into a circuit breaker panel. And takes up 2 slots in your circuit breaker panel. It has all the communications, the Wi-Fi and everything to communicate with your network, but also the communications to talk to the car when you plug it in. And then from there, an electrician just has to run cable out to either an outlet in your garage, or you could actually have it hardwired with the charging connector right on there. And so that that simplifies things. You don't necessarily need to have a wall box with this system. So it simplifies the installation. So that was an interesting thing.
Who makes
and
that?
actually,
and when is that going to be available?
It's a company called Eaton.
ETON.
ETON.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I think it's actually available now through electricians. So if you're looking to set up charging in your home, and you can also for somebody like for an apartment building, for example, in the garage, if they want to set up charging stations in an apartment building garage or even a public garage, all you need is just a panel, and then just put in a bunch of these units in the panel, and then just run the wiring out to each parking space, and you don't have to install a whole bunch of wall box chargers in there.
It's actually EATON. I was thinking of ETON, which is the solar company. This is EATON. And that's really cool. We had to bring an electrician out and put in a NEMA 1450 plug for our charging.
And you'll still need an electrician to install this.
Right.
But it really simplifies the work.
And this solves that thing you were talking about, which is getting AC charging more widely available, because if you're going to have an EV, you need to be able to charge it up.
The other thing that's going to help with that is actually something that happened in December, just before Christmas, was the release of the new SAE J3400 standard. So SAE is the Society of Automotive Engineers, and among the things that they do is they develop standards, industry standards for all kinds of things. They developed the original J1772 standard, which is the current plug that you find on non-Tesla vehicles.
This looks just like a NACS connector.
It is. So J3400 is the standard. So they took
the Tesla connector.
They took the Tesla connector, and developed standards around it so that so that everybody could work to these standards for interoperability. And but there's some additional advantages of it relative to what because Tesla, their standards, their communications and everything were more limited because it was only designed to work with their cars. So what they did, since they're taking this opportunity to develop a new standard, is they added some things to it. Like the current J1772 standard is designed for 240 volt systems, which is what you typically have in your house. So you have 480 volts coming in, that goes through a transformer, gets stepped down, and it goes to 240 volts. And your 240 volt outlets, or your 240 volt, your typical level 2 chargers at home are run on 240 volts, which means they have to have extra transformers in there, because the 480 volts that's coming from the power lines outside your house, that is 3-phase. And in the US, we use single phase alternating current. And I'm not going to go through all the math, but basically, if you take a single phase of a 3-phase 40 volt circuit, what you actually have is 277 volts.
Oh, dear.
And so all the 240 volt stuff, you have to have transformers that step it down from 277 to 240. Well, the J3400 standard specifies that this is meant to work with anything up to 277 volts on a single phase.
Nice.
The reason why that's important is because things like light poles that are out on the curb and other public utilities, those all actually run at 277 volts, not 240.
Right.
And so what we can now do is we can start putting outlets on light poles and other public infrastructure that runs at 277 volts. And all you need is a cord to plug in to that and plug into your car.
That's huge.
And you don't have to install charging, all kinds of other charging equipment or transformers. So it makes it a lot simpler. Plus, going from 240 to 277, you can charge 25% faster.
Yeah.
And it's actually because you're eliminating that transformer in there, it's also more efficient. So it's about 3 to 4% more efficient. So it's going to cost you less for electricity, or less wasted. You're not wasting electricity as heat in that transformer. So a lot of advantages to that. And we're going to start seeing that rolling out into vehicles towards the end of this year.
Yeah. Now, I, of course, have the old 1772 in my new EV, but there'll be an adapter we can use, right, to use the new.
Yes.
But I won't ever be able to use 277.
Those should be coming out in the spring. The CCS to NACS adapter, or NACS to CCS adapters.
Nice.
So you'd be able to plug into a supercharger and charge it off of that,
right.
or a Tesla destination charger at various locations like hotels and a lot of restaurants.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing that a lot of these hotels have Tesla destination chargers instead of standard chargers, which is okay. So good. I'll get an adapter. Sam, always a pleasure. Sounds like you're just recovering from, what did you say? Was that a joke, or did you really go 32 miles?
I flew out last Saturday. I got in Saturday afternoon into Vegas, and I came back. I got back Friday night. I should have been home about 6, but it was closer to about 8:30 by the time I got home, because it was snowing here when I got home.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
We just barely made it in. Within about a half hour after we landed, they closed the runways at Detroit Metro Airport, and no more flights were going in or out.
Wow.
So there were a lot of people sitting in Detroit Metro Airport going nowhere on Friday night. But we managed to get in.
Survive that Arctic chill in Ypsilanti.
Yeah. Well, it's like 6 or 7 degrees outside right now.
Yikes.
It's supposed to go down to -3 tonight.
Yikes. Sam Abuelsamid, principal researcher, Guidehouse Insights, and of course, the Wheel Bearings podcast, where you'll hear a lot more about this at wheelbearings.media. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure to chat with you guys.
Always a pleasure. Take care.